in the writing, what was their relationship to the divine?
Relationship with the divine, well, the first thing to say is that they had a large pantheon of gods. So there were three gods at the top, sometimes called Anu, Enlil, and Ea. There were three gods at the top and hundreds of other gods and goddesses. And you have the situation that I think lots of small villages and towns had their old ancient gods, and eventually they're all worked into a kind of theological system, like a phone book, and the lesser, minor gods were amalgamated, and then they were given jobs in the households of the big gods. So there was a sort of structure. So you have this in the background, a big sweeping theology, like you have in the world today in some parts of the world. And this was the main system, and the main gods were concerned with the ruler and the fate of the country. And another god was concerned with illness and the dead and what happens to the dead, and they had other specialities, and they all had their own temples. And when a baby came into the world, probably this was universally true, the baby was put under the tutelage of one or other of the gods. Sometimes, the royal family, they were the big shots, but sometimes not, or the ones that were in the family or something like that. So people grew up with the idea that among all of them, there were special ones for the family, and they had a special one who was supposed to look after them. That's the sort of basic idea. But the trouble is, since gods are, as you say, human beings on a larger scale, they can be forgetful or uninterested or on holiday, and there are lots of ways that you have to prompt your make little sacrifices and little bribes so that they do their job and keep an eye on you. So they had that kind of slightly practical view of gods, that they were a bit unpredictable, great when they were there but not always there sort of idea. And I also believe this, that a lot of people in the world today who did not have the disadvantage of growing up in a stifling religion, but are just normal people, get a lot more interested when they're really ill or when they have a big disaster. All of a sudden, God or gods seem a lot more important than they do normally. So that few people walk about in a state of religious awe, and a good proportion of clergymen I've ever met don't do that either. It's a kind of conception that's not actually based on reality, that the individual's response to religious stimuli fluctuates and is varied and is often a response to need. It doesn't come from nothing. I mean, people don't suddenly feel, I've got to thank the Lord for the rainbow or something like that. I think it's probably true today. I mean, when you read the investigations they make of religion today, Christianity in this country is on the decline because people who are supposed to be Christians say they aren't anymore. They're atheists. So the people who say, I go to church and I believe in everything, is a relatively small number of people. So now this is the situation, which is quite remarkable if you think about it. And Lord knows what the consequence will be for the human race, whether religion will balance out, whether it will die off, who knows.
I think it's an ancient technology that has proven across millennia to give a set of tools to humans to contend, as you said, with suffering. That's a part of life. So when those rare moments come, when you have to deal with deep pain, loss, suffering, heartbreak, all those things, looking up to the sky and asking questions and trying to figure out the answers in your conversation with the divine.
I think that's true. But I think in Mesopotamia, it was different in terms of its potency and immediacy, because there's no skyscrapers in Iraq. If you live in southern Iraq and you sleep on the roof, and there are no lights at night, you're under the stars, you can see everything because of no smog and everything like that. And the idea that the gods are there watching, it's not like a big artifice like it is here. It just doesn't ring true here. You can't come to it and really believe in it, whereas these people didn't have to really believe in it because it was it.
It's the obvious practical part of life. They're right there.
Yeah. But it's like they didn't believe in ghosts. They took them for granted. And they didn't believe in the gods. They took them for granted. This is a different mechanism, because nobody here in the world today takes those things for granted, just the opposite. But I think that's how it worked. So you didn't have people wrestling with the idea of whether the gods really exist or whether they really care about me. They gave them a nudge when it was necessary. And they might offer this, they might offer that, but it was the system, it was the prevailing system. And I think it's an important difference. And also that thing about ghosts is that it's clear from the inscriptions, all of them, that I managed to find, that nobody ever asked themselves, do these things exist or not? Or did I really see them or not? Or did I not? They didn't. They just took it all for granted.
What are ghosts? Is it usually ancestors?
Well, everybody who died in bed naturally or peacefully, what we call their ghost, went down to the netherworld. And there they were. So they buried people jolly quick, for obvious reasons. And like they do in Islam and Judaism today, it's the same kind of idea. And the spirit of the person went down through the gates of the netherworld and stayed there. So that's the basic situation. And people in their houses had actual burials under the courtyard. And they had a thing where you pour stuff down a hole, fluid and food, as kind of symbolic offerings to them.
So is that a way to lessen the impact of mortality?
I don't know, because you know that everyone's going to die. I think the real tragedy is if we're not supposed to. That would be the tragedy. But every single person is going to die. So all relationships have this finite clause in them. So if you're very fond of somebody or you love somebody and they die, it's kind of infantile to whine about it ever after. Because what do you think was going to happen? Either you or them. You know, I always see it like that. I don't feel grief when people die.
It is infantile, but I got to tell you something about human beings. We're all kind of infantile all the way through from, we don't stop being infantile after we're infants. It's one thing to know it, theoretically, and it's another thing to know it. Like this thing ends. This ride ends.
But that's the pain. It's the fact that the whole thing ends.
Yeah.
And when people fall off the edge, they fall off the edge.
So yeah, the knowledge that it ends is the painful thing, not the actual moment of the ending. Yeah. Many times what makes moments really precious is that they're going to be gone. I think that's not a trivial thing for us humans to really contend with. I think religion, religious thought, the divine, I think help with that.
I think the big mistake for mankind was the creation of monotheistic religions, because they brought evil into the world. Because if you believe in a monotheistic religion, it means I'm right and you're wrong if you don't. So it's already on that footing.
It's very dogmatic, yeah.
Dogmatic, and it's led to everything. There's inquisitions and all this kind of stuff. It's all as a result of it that one religion is superior and the other should be stamped out and all that. And in my opinion, the monotheistic religion has generated the most fantastic amount of non-religious feeling. Whereas when you have all the different gods and they have different specialities, and the ones you like and the ones that everybody likes, and they have their temples and their offerings, it was very interesting to me to go into a temple in Calcutta. When I went there with my wife Joanna, we went into the temples and saw how they were. And I think they must be very much like the ones in Mesopotamia. So there was never anything about them which affronted people's individuality or I mean, there's no religious prejudice or even racial prejudice in antiquity. All these things are modern, disadvantageous matters. If you think what's done in the name of religion, it is absolutely staggering.